The Seattle Seahawks won their second straight game on Sunday, sprinting away from the Carolina Panthers in the second half. Joining us to break down the victory and preview the upcoming Monday night showdown with the Giants is 710 Seattle Sports radio host Stacy Rost. Let's light 'em up.
I'm Jacson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts.
Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jacson Bevins, and along with my prodigious producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast. Mike, how we doing today?
We are great, Jackson. We are almost through the first month of the NFL season. I have no idea how that happened, but we're back home. We're recording. And yeah, man, all is right in the world. How are you?
I'm doing amazing, man. It's good to be home again after spending most of the last 2+ weeks in Palm Springs and Phoenix. Fall fell. It's my favorite time of the year, and the Seahawks are cooking.
They are cooking. They're 2-1. I think that is probably the record that we were looking for through 3 weeks. It's not necessarily the permutation that we thought that they would embark on to get there, but we're here. I'm a results-based guy. What can I say?
Yeah, exactly. Throw the process out the window, baby.
Always.
Yeah, the Seahawks kept the good times rolling. They pulled away from the Panthers in the second half of Sunday's game, and they head into their Monday night matchup with the Giants on a 2-game win streak. We're going to break down the victory and preview that showdown. But first, I want to remind everyone that we've partnered with one of the most prestigious cigar manufacturers in the world to release the official Cigar Thoughts cigars. You can order them directly from cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Just follow the link to get these easy-to-smoke stogies rolled with 13-year aged premium Dominican tobacco leaf, or hit us up on Twitter or Instagram and we'll send you the details directly. The feedback on these cigars so far has been overwhelming. As we've mentioned before, a box of 10 of these cigars would normally go for between $350 to $400, but our partnership allows you to get your own bundle of 10 for just $169. That's less than half of MSRP, and the cigars come with a Bovita humidification pack and a Mylar storage bag to make sure they stay fresh whether you have a humidor or not. We also appreciate the love y'all have given our YouTube channel, where you can catch entire episodes as well as video clips from every show, including this one. This is one of the best ways you can help Cigar Thoughts grow, so we're grateful for the few seconds you can take to subscribe and like the video. Man, I tell you, Mike, the NFL is crazy. We saw the Cardinals beat the Cowboys, the Texans waxed the Jaguars, the Dolphins hung 70 on the Broncos, and a bunch of other crazy shit happened this week. It's a reminder that we don't really know what's going to happen and that every win should be cherished, even if it's against a struggling team like the Panthers. And joining us to break it all down is the co-host of the Bump and Stacy show on 710 Seattle Sports and one of our very favorite people to talk to. She is Stacy Rost. Stacy, thanks for coming on.
I'm going to start listening to the beginning and end of every podcast to make sure that you don't ever introduce another guest as one of our favorite people. Because you know what I mean? I'm just going to be following up to be like, oh, now he's the favorite? Now that's who it is?
Yeah. Well, that's what,
just letting you guys know. I'm going to be auditing a lot of these.
Absolutely. We will lay our track record bare for you.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Really appreciate you having on, especially after a long day of talking sports.
I am happy, always happy to join you guys. Always a great time.
Yeah, well, we love having you. And Stacy, this was a big week for the Seahawks, and not just because they had a game on Sunday. This was the week they celebrated the 10th anniversary of the 2013 Super Bowl winning team. They had events and appearances with a lot of guys from that roster in the days leading up to the game. The hype always seems high around the VMAC, but did it feel like there was some extra juice with all those guys here this week?
We didn't actually we went out to the VMAC Thursday and kept it pretty in-house with the huddle. I would say that the vibe from the people we talked to, so obviously the morning show had KJ, we had Doug on. I think it was from the limited exposure, I got more reflective than like hype and here we go, but just kind of like an appreciative. And that might have been the tone that we got from Baldwin. So when we talked to Doug, it was in part because of all of those guys participating in part of driving volunteerism for food drives. So he already is in a mindset of like, hey, giving back to the community, and we're all still here and we've all stuck around. But even then, the conversation just kind of naturally went to like, hey, all of you guys are from different areas. Like, Sherm, you're from California. Doug, you're from Florida. Cliff's from Florida. Like, they're all from all over the place. A lot of you guys stayed here. Like, you might, Sherm might have a house elsewhere or whatever, but a lot of these guys chose to raise their families, have their kids, get married, get their homes here. And
how remarkable for a dying city.
I know. Well, no, but I really was. That has always been one of the most fascinating things to me, because when I first started covering the team, a lot of the guys would do their training elsewhere. And what I didn't quite understand when I first started, because I was in like my early 20s, is how much of those guys have specialized training. So they're not just leaving because they don't want to be here. They're leaving to go back home, but also like they're paying some guy a lot of money to like train him in the off season. But I kind of came up while that team was really successful, assuming all these guys are going to leave. Like they're gonna be great. They're gonna have fun, but like, you're going to go back home to Texas. You're going to go back home to Florida. You're going to go to the East Coast. You're going to find, a job with ESPN as a talking head, and you're going to go live in Connecticut or whatever. And it's been really cool to listen to, Cliff's talked to us about this. Doug has talked to us about this, how much they've adopted Seattle as a home for so many of them. Like, there's such a genuine tone to a lot of that. Like, I truly, truly think that for Doug, who didn't grow up here, he sees it as like, Seattle's my neighborhood, and like, this is my home and my community. And so how am I helping? It was very cool.
Yeah. Well, you feel it when you see these guys at practice and you hear the players talk about having them around, and then, they've been chatting with each other on each other's podcasts and with Pete Carroll, and, like, they went through the shit together too. I mean, like, they had this amazing run, put together one of the most talented rosters in recent NFL history, and then like almost broke. And I think a lot of the guys did break. And to still be there on the other side of that is really, really remarkable, especially with, the way that some of these guys left.
Oh, there are relationships I never thought would heal. Like, I never thought that like Richard Sherman and Pete Carroll would be sitting down for a podcast. And this is knowing that like Sherm had gone into media and had clearly like, he's matured, he's grown, like he's a father, like, you know what I mean? He's not 25 anymore. But I just assumed, based on things that I'd heard, that locker room was so fractured after Super Bowl 49 that there were relationships and wounds that would never heal. And I think that a lot of those have. And it came with time. It came with years of, going to different teams or being traded or being released or whatever. But like, you guys, it was not that long ago that Sherm was on a podcast talking about how the Seahawks have lost their way.
Oh, yeah.
It was not that long ago that Earl was getting carted off the field, flipping the bird to the sideline. Yeah. Granted, he wasn't part of the festivities here, but like, I thought, wow, the 30 for 30 about this team will be about them going out, with kind of like a whimper. And it's not going to be this lovey-dovey thing at the end. And lo and behold, that's exactly what this week was.
You mentioned time, but it's got to be more than that. I mean, lots of broken relationships have time and never heal, right?
Yeah.
Do you think it's like a credit to the culture of the Pete Carroll era Seahawks? Yeah?
Yeah, I do.
Especially with some of these guys going to other teams and realizing it's not like this everywhere.
I think that's part of it. So I think part of it is, yes, like for guys that went to other organizations. I mean, I know that like Luke Wilson went to Detroit. You go from where it's really, really fun. And I think he talked about this since coming back. But like, you go to Detroit, you think it's going to be fun. You are with like the worst head coach at the time, Matt Patricia, which was like no fun ever. No fun allowed. And you realize like, oh, like I might think that Pete Carroll gets a little, repetitive with some of his, stuff about sticking together, but like you kind of have to. That's kind of the point. And you kind of, it might get stale, but then find a new way to buy in and believe, or just be appreciative of it if it works for you, because it isn't like that everywhere. And I think too, part of it was, I wondered if part of it is being the subject of some of that criticism. Like I wondered if for Richard Sherman, for instance, if part of it was leaving and being like, oh, now I'm in the media and I kind of get like, now that I can see players and in the mistakes or decisions that they make, and I'm older, I'm thinking about some of the mistakes and decisions that I made. I also think it's like, again, when we talked to Doug, he pointed to specifically their president of communications, who's worked with a lot of these guys. And we were like, hey, how'd you kind of get into giving back and stuff? Was that unique to this culture? And he was like, yeah, they care about you as people. Like they care about you as men. And I got to give it, he gave a shout out to, his name's Dave Pearson. He was like, I got to give a shout out to Dave Pearson because I don't think I went back and forth with him at the time. And I don't think I always realized that like they're doing it because they care.
Sure. We also forget that these guys are in their 20s, right? Like I think about me in my 20s, like we're so hard on them, right? Because, we're fans or we cover the team or we talk or write about them. And we're like, oh, you didn't do your job or you're a bust or whatever, people say. And it's like, man, I'm thinking about what a dipshit I was in my 20s. It's like, of course, these guys are going to be able to mature and look back and see how good it probably was taken as a whole.
Thankfully, you're still a dipshit.
Yeah, fair enough.
We are grateful for that.
I am still a dipshit, just more grays in the beard now.
It is really wild though. I was thinking about this. I'm not even kidding. It's funny you say it. I was thinking about it watching one of the Monday Night Football games where I was like, everyone I'm watching was born in like 2000. And like, they're all some of the best athletes to play this game. They're all making a ton of money. Not everyone, but like the whole league is circulated around guys that are like between 21 and 28 most of the time. Crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. But as far as the actual game goes, I thought this was a really, really interesting one. And, there's a ton to get to with it. And for the first half, it seemed like it was going to be a bit of a grinder. The Seahawks ended up opening it up over the final 2 quarters. They scored 3 touchdowns after the 5 field goals to start, and they ended up winning fairly comfortably. The offenses received a lot of credit for that, but I want to start on the other side of the ball.
Love it.
The Seahawks defense has been something of an inverse from what we saw last year. They've been excellent against the run in 2023, but each game has shown some breakdowns in the secondary. What's been your impression of how the defense played on Sunday?
I think that they looked more like a bend, don't break. It's not a unique opinion. I feel like it's what a lot of people have been saying, but it's one of the many conversations I was having with people after the game. Week 1 was bend and break. Like you allowed, 400 plus net yards. And the conversation that we've all been having about the Seahawks over all these years is like, well, if you allow a ton of yards, but then don't allow a ton of points, then maybe the yards are okay. The problem is when you allow a ton of yards, you let them convert on 3rd down, you allow 30 points. Nothing about that is like shutting down any part of the field. It's just getting your butt whooped. This one, granted, Andy Dalton threw like how many, 57, 58 times. So he's going to get his yardage. But you had explosive plays from an offense that has not had a lot of them. Mm-hmm. You had a lot of passing yards from an offense that has not had a ton of success with their wide receivers and with their offensive line. But you also mostly kept them out of the end zone. Like they found the red zone once until the final couple minutes of the game. So, I mean, it's not the most stress-free way to watch a defense.
Right.
It is, however, I thought an improvement, a pretty notable improvement from week 1.
Yeah, I think for me, the fact that they've been good against the run is the most encouraging thing because that is the worst way to watch your team lose.
Ugh.
Like that Falcons lost, the Raiders lost, the Panthers lost. These were not good teams last year. And they whooped Seattle by just running. Like you knew it was coming. You knew every play was going to take another 40 to 50 seconds off of the clock. And it's just maddening to watch. Mm-hmm. This year, they've been excellent against that. I mean, yeah, they gave up 3 touchdowns on the ground in week 1 when things were kind of falling apart.
1 yard, 2 yards.
But they were. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. And I thought this game provided like such a perfect contrast because Carolina came to Seattle last year and they ran for 223 yards in that game. They had 44 in this one. Mm-hmm. And then on top of it, the other thing Seattle struggled with last year was getting pressure on the quarterback. They couldn't do it in week 1. They were pretty good about it in week 2. This week, and I saw this today from Hawkblogger on Twitter, they led the NFL with 36 pressures on Sunday.
Wow.
They were getting to Andy Dalton 2 out of every 3 dropbacks, which is really, really impressive and very encouraging.
Very encouraging. That's a great stat from Brian. I love that. And I know that the Panthers offensive line had struggled, right? Mm-hmm. But they didn't allow that to other teams. I mean, right. I think people are having a little bit of a very understandable panic when it comes to the defense. You see a defense that has been in the bottom third of the league in points or in scoring or whatever for the last couple of years. You see a season start like that and you think, here we go again. We go again, right? Like it feels a little bit different. Now, there are certain issues that keep, cropping up, or rather, there are things that happen multiple times in a game. Like they were getting beat over the middle constantly from the Rams. And you've seen it crop up just a little bit too in the next two games. But like, I was wondering if, because the Panthers want to spread the ball around to a lot of their different targets, I was wondering if we'd see a lot more to Hurst, a lot more in the pass game to Sanders, because I was like, of course they're going to find a way to take advantage of those flat routes or take advantage of the middle of the field. And you didn't really see that. Like they improved there. So all you can ask right now is for improvement. Really important to note that they haven't had the healthy version of this defense yet.
Right.
And people will look at it and they'll be like, I cannot tell you how many texts a week we get saying Jamal Adams is washed. Or like, Jamal Adams is a bum. Yeah. I disagree with it wholeheartedly. But I think people they're burnt out. They're mad that he can't play, and so they hate the trade. But like,
right.
What does the defense look like with him out there? Better. The answer is better.
Absolutely.
We're going to find out.
Well, we are finally going to find out. We are finally going to find out. Because the thing is like, that is a pretty common fan sentiment. And I get it. Like, I push back on it because I don't agree, but I understand where it's coming from. And he's a bit of a victim of the cost of the acquisition.
Yep.
But, and he hasn't been available. And I don't think that's because he's not tough enough or any of that stuff. He's played through more injuries than the ones that have kept him out. But everyone we've had on this show that's close to the team is like, yeah, Jamal Adams is the difference maker for this team.
Yes.
And then it's, the folks who aren't as close who are like, he's washed, he's a bum, like you were saying. One thing about the pressures that I was thinking about today, getting ready for the show, and I thought about it a little bit as it's writing the article after the game too. They were able, I think, to get that much pressure on Andy Dalton. One, yes, they threw a ton of pass attempts, so that's going to give you more opportunities. But when you're stopping the run, you can rush with more conviction, right? Because you're in a situation where you realize, okay, they're not getting yards on the ground. They're going to have to throw it here. You're seeing more 2nd and 10s, 2nd and 8s. You're seeing 3rd and 7s and 3rd and 11s. And with all the penalties that the crowd helped induce, lots of 3rd and 14s. And like, then you get to just rush, right? And like, that's what's fun for these guys, instead of being like, well, it's 3rd and 2, we got to make sure that we just fill this gap here.
Yeah.
So I do think that, everything is connected to each other in football. I think it's really especially true on defense. But, we've been talking about kind of the overarching scheme stuff and how they've played as a unit. We saw some pretty impressive individual standouts in this game. And I can't wait to talk about Devin Witherspoon, but doing so would overshadow how good Jarran Reed was. Jarran Reed might have played the best game of his career on Sunday.
I will be the first to raise my hand and admit that I did not expect a huge year from Jarran Reed. Jarran Reed was the last, and Frank Clark, the last two defensive linemen to get double-digit sacks. The last two players, period, to get double-digit sacks for this team. So there is that kind of difference you can clearly see from when those two departed. But he just he didn't find the same success, whether it was with the Chiefs, Green Bay, wherever else. And so when he came back, I thought, full disclosure, my initial reaction was, are they nervous about Cam Young at nose? And so they're just bringing back someone that they know can help out a little bit. And this guy is going to maybe work like a backup plan. Nope. It turns out that he is still really, really solid. And, man, what a difference even just a couple weeks makes when you've got a new defensive line too. I think people see it as an excuse, and I understand why you think it's just coach speak, but I really do think that Hurt and Carroll mean it when they talk about how important it is that these guys get new reps together each week. They haven't been playing together. Like, you look at some of the best defenses around the league. What do a lot of them have in common?
Continuity.
Like, they're the same. Exactly. Continuity. They're the same guys coming back more often than not, the same defensive coordinators. And they're the same guys in the most important parts of the defense right up front. When you're learning the guy next to you, like, it's not just about, I'm going to learn, his tendencies. It's like, I need to learn to trust him. I need to learn when to let him go, because I know that he's going to be able to get to this, and I know what he can do. Like, it's such a, I never played, so I don't fully understand this, but I think it's still, even then, such a misunderstood and underrated part of playing together is just knowing each other.
Yeah.
Like, knowing what the guy next to you is capable of. these guys don't fully know that yet. A lot of them have never played together.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And a lot of times with defensive linemen, especially interior defensive linemen, their impact doesn't get captured in the box score. But that wasn't the case for Reed in this game. He had 8 tackles, which is like a monster number for an interior defensive lineman. And 2 of them were like 8 or 10 yards downfield. So it's not like, oh, hey, I didn't make the play in the backfield.
Yeah, it's like cleaning up.
It's like he's turning around and running down. I mean, he knocked Miles Sanders out of the game 10 yards downfield at one point, but he had a sack and a half. He had 3 QB hits. He had 2 tackles for a loss. So he's doing it, but it freed up, Boye Mafe is really coming into his own. And I think that's not only just the second year leap and kind of understanding what it's like to be an NFL player, but also to your point, like he's getting production from guys around him that wasn't there when he was a rookie.
I'm so glad you mentioned Boye Mafe too. Like I know that we headed into the season looking at Darrell Taylor and Uchenna Nwosu being like, okay, it's these 2 guys, and then who's gonna, find themselves kind of behind them. But like, I have loved what Boye Mafe has quietly been doing to start the season, and he's been like, wasn't he like nursing a little bit of an injury too? Yeah. Kind of, being able to come back out. Like I really, really like him a lot. So I'm excited to see how he progresses. I'm really excited to see him against New York.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's kind of a, Mike pointed this out on Twitter, I think yesterday, but he's kind of a forgotten piece of the all caps trade,
yes.
And the fact that he is becoming, like Mike said, a legitimate edge player in the NFL. If that's who he is, I mean, it's just blessings upon blessings for this team.
It's so funny how that trade has continued to develop. I know that we're going to get back to the Seahawks, but like when it first happened, it was like, you guys got Drew Lock. What are you going to do with him? And then you have some first rounders. And now you look back and you're like,
everyone was like, it's Russell Wilson for Drew Lock.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember I went on like a ESPN radio and very understandably, that's how they were talking about it. Because if I was not in Seattle, I would not have understood Pete Carroll's love of Geno Smith. He loves Geno Smith. And we were talking about it, and I was like, I mean, they got Geno Smith too. And I think that's what every reporter here was saying, right? I wasn't unique in doing that. They were like, well, there's also Geno Smith, and there's also all these other guys. And they also like have never had picks this high. What are they going to do with number 9? And it was so fun, but it's, man, like I love Noah Fant. What Shane Waldron is doing with the tight ends this year, it was such an underrated missing aspect to the offense for such a long time. And I love incorporating them more. And you'll look at some of the most explosive plays this year, and best drives this year have been with those guys incorporated. He's part of that too.
Yeah. Well, and what may end up being the biggest piece of that trade is who Seattle took at number 5.
Right.
And you were live with us when that happened.
I was
like
shocked.
the viral moment from this podcast when they took Devin Witherspoon. And, I was quite visibly excited at the time because I fell in love with him once I started to hear some whispers that they liked him at the combine. I was like, I don't really know who this guy is. I started watching him play. I was like, holy shit.
He's amazing.
Like, this guy is different. And like I said in the article on Sunday, he plays with the juice that I don't think we've seen from a Seattle defender since the team that they were honoring this week. Like, he is ferocious out there. Check this. He was targeted 11 times in this game. Like, they made a point early to go after him, and they got him a couple of times. And then after that, nothing. On 11 targets, he allowed 3 catches for 19 yards, broke up 2 passes, and still led the team with 11 tackles.
Yeah, I love you mentioning, first of all, just the actual demeanor, the physicality, the edge. I can't wait for that reason to see him and Jamal when Jamal is fully healthy, which like, even though Pete Carroll says no restrictions for this week, I think we're all kind of like expecting a version of like, are you going to be in there as part of this 3 safety look and not necessarily replacing Julian? We'll see what happens. Right. But like, those 2 guys have juice. Like, they have it. And I always hate talking about like, oh, that edge or that like, dog mentality is missing from a defense, because those guys are out there, they're balling out, like they're trying their hardest. Who am I to sit here and say that? But like, hey, as a fan who watched this defense in 2012, 13, 14, and then now, if I'm honest with myself, there is sometimes that like chippiness that's missing, and that literal, like, without no pun intended, like that boom that's missing. And I think I agree with you 1,000%. I think Devin brings it. And I loved, initially made fun of him because it's so easy to do. But Michael Bumpus, when we were talking about the game, said, hey, my one word to describe, Witherspoon from this weekend is geometry. And I said, that's such a dumb word. Why did you choose geometry? What? I thought you were going to say like, or like tough. And he said, because he understands angles in a way that I've rarely seen from a rookie defensive back. And I think that is something that, and this is what he's saying, I think that that's something that can take years to develop. It's how you let big plays get away from you. It's literally, it sounds silly, but like understanding the best angle to take something right away is such a gift. And that's what you get when you have 5 overall versus, hey, we found this guy in the 3rd round.
That's exactly it. And it allows you to play with the fierceness, with the ferocity that you can't when you're thinking about your angle, right? Like if you have that innate understanding of the angle that you need to take, of that geometry, then you just get to pin the ears back and go. And that's all his college tape is him doing that. And he doesn't seem blinded by the lights one bit at this level.
No. And I loved, other people were tweeting about this, and there was a video that came out about it. I couldn't tell if it was him at first, but during the week 1 opener, when everyone was still in a good mood, this is maybe 2 minutes into the game, this guy was one of the most hyped players on the sideline. There wasn't this kind of like, oh, I'm a rookie, I'm just going to be here and I'm just going to hang out quietly. I mean, this guy was hyping everyone up. He was lifting up his arms. He was waving to the crowd, like, waving to like get them to be loud. Like he's ready to go. He was ready to go week 1. And I have, and I don't know if you guys have done this. Obviously been watching a lot of Jalen Carter, and it's a very natural thing. Like the Seahawks made the decision and they made what was right for them. But there's still a part of you that's going to be curious because, I mean, we spoke with Devin's college coach, and even he was like, the cameras, because he was in the green room with Devin, he was like, the cameras were trained on another player. The other player was Jalen. Like the cameras were trained on Jalen Carter when the Seahawks were making their pick to get the reaction. They didn't even initially get the reaction from Witherspoon because they didn't think they'd take him.
Yeah.
So obviously you're going to naturally watch him. Even despite the stellar start to his career that Jalen is having, I feel fine. Like I have loved what we've seen from Witherspoon. I really have.
Well, we had Danny Kelly on last week, and he was saying, look, if we get 10 years down the road and there have been no off-field issues or practice issues with Jalen Carter, then okay, you tip your hat and
nice pick.
Maybe you relitigate the pick. But my guess is we're not going to look back on the Devin Witherspoon pick and be like, man, they really blew that one, right? I think we're going to end up seeing 2 really good players. And, and if Carter came here, he is the defensive line. Over there, he's like one of 8 dudes that
he can do more damage.
The possibility, he's only playing 50% of the snaps there. And so he's full go every time. So, it's in the same way that, for the first year, it was almost impossible to talk about Geno without talking about Russell Wilson.
Yep.
It's going to be the same thing with Witherspoon as a rookie with Jalen Carter, and it is what it is. But I'm really happy about that pick. I do want to talk about one other guy that you mentioned when we were talking about Jamal Adams earlier, and that is Julian Love. So every fan base, I'm sure, certainly in Seattle, early on, you pick one guy out and he is the tar and feather guy. And that's been Julian Love so far. And Mike and I were texting about this recently because I haven't been that critical of Love. And, I'm taking notes and writing during the game and stuff. Yeah. Maybe I'm missing some things. I haven't thought that he was so terrible. Mike vehemently disagrees with me. What has your impression of Julian Love been so far?
My impression of Julian Love is, for every mistake he makes that really bothers you, like a horrible missed tackle to allow for a huge gain to get Carolina inside the Seattle red zone, he does something else that then makes up for it. So in my mind, it's like he's kind of breaking even every week, and I'm okay with that. After watching a defense that, like, for a while, no offense to him, had guys like Tedrick Thompson, I'm like, I'm okay with a guy that isn't like a negative. Like that, like he might break out at like a net zero in that game. I'm fine with that for right now. And I also think that God, I feel like so many analysts that I love reading, whether it's like Mina or whoever else, really liked Julian. So I'm like, I'm gonna hesitate just yet to pass too quick a judgment, because like a lot of people loved what he did with New York. So I'm kind of waiting to see.
Oh, sure. This was a what have you done for me lately sort of
Fair.
opinion, right?
Fair.
I mean, so this week there was definitely some redemptive qualities to his performance.
Yeah.
He had that PBU. He had. I mean, it felt like I tweeted this out, but it felt like every play he made was just when he was guarding Hayden Hurst. Like that's just that's the skeleton key that unlocks his.
Your tweet that said Julian Love when he's defending Hayden Hurst, and it's a picture of Brian Dawkins.
Yeah, that's right. NFC East legends. But I mean, like in week 2, the tackling has been an issue. Like the long touchdown.
And it's a big deal when you miss tackles at the back end of the defense.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't necessarily think that was his responsibility. Michael Jackson was thrust into action pretty suddenly. And, it's probably a deep zone that he should have carried. But, you got to make that tackle on the goal line. The one that stuck out to me was last week against Detroit, where he attempted to tackle Sam Laporta on just a little hitch, and he missed and also took out Devin Witherspoon and allowed, just bowled him over and allowed the tight end to, exactly. And I think that was their touchdown drive in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, I'm optimistic though. I don't necessarily think that this portends the same level of dissatisfaction throughout the season.
I think you need to pick one thing that seems a little unlikely, or maybe very unlikely. And if he does this, you can't ever complain about Julian. Like, you have to be team Julian Love. It has to be like if he gets, a pick 6 and a sack in a game, a la, Trey Brown, you're like, I have to defend him no matter what he does. He could have 6 missed tackles, and I'd have to be like, it's not his day. You know what I mean? Everyone.
yeah.
You have to be almost like comically team Julian.
You know what Julian Love reminds me of? He reminds me of the green shell in Mario Kart, where you shoot that thing and it is going to bounce around everywhere. It might take out the person that you're shooting it at. It might take you out, but
exactly.
But it ain't stopping.
And look, if you got it, you use it. Okay, you can't just let those turtles go
absolutely
wrong.
Yeah. Devin Witherspoon, he's the red shell. He's hitting his target. Julian Love, he's just flying around. And maybe I'm a little biased. My brother-in-law, Jesse, is a big Giants fan and really knows that team. And he was so bummed that they didn't bring Julian Love back. He was like, heart and soul of the defense. You guys got a real one. So I might be coming into it a little bit biased because of that.
It's okay. I'm a little biased because we interviewed him. He was so nice. I do that too. I'm like, if a player's really nice, I'm like, oh, he tried, like it wasn't his best thing.
He's trying so hard out
He's
there.
trying so hard, you guys.
I think another piece of the puzzle for Julian Love is what you were talking about on the defensive line. Like, these guys just don't have snaps together. So, it takes some time to gel, especially with all the pieces coming in and out of the lineup with injuries. But you get Reek Woolen back this week. You get Jamal Adams back this week. Hopefully you can see them deploy their chess pieces how they intend to.
Yeah.
Well, and that's crazy. I mean, here we are talking about the Seahawks defense. Haven't even mentioned Reek Woolen, who, was a top 10 corner in the NFL. Basically his second year ever playing cornerback. So, I mean, the fact that they've been this good, missing so many of the guys that they have been, right? I mean, no Jamal Adams, no Reek Woolen, without their 2 starting tackles. And I do want to switch over to the offense here, because I think there were 2 stories that you could tell about the Seahawks in the first half. On the one hand, they had been moving the ball well, getting multiple first downs on every drive except for the first one. Mm-hmm. But on the other, they basically malfunctioned as soon as they got into scoring range. I wrote on Sunday, it's like their engine had a kill switch that got activated at the 30-yard line. Like, they just stopped.
Just bumped it with your shoulder. You bent over to grab something and you accidentally knocked it.
Every time, right? Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. Fortunately, we got the good version of Jason Myers, and he made all of his kicks. But it took the Seahawks 8 possessions before they scored a touchdown. But after that, they were practically unstoppable. They had 3 touchdowns in a 4-drive sequence. Geno had that really bad interception right after the defense gave up a long score. And it felt like this snowball could start rolling here. And it didn't. They righted the ship and ended up having a hugely productive game, both on the ground and through the air. But was there at any point in that game where you felt worried about the offense?
1,000%. Like several minutes into the game. Well, first of all, I should admit, I was late to the game. So I showed up like near the end of the first quarter. So I was listening to play-by-play. And my favorite thing about listening to play-by-play from the Seahawks broadcast is you can always tell when they're having a bad day because Dave Wyman in the background, you can hear him going, oh. So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of like,
yeah.
Okay. So I knew heading into it, like, okay, things haven't quite been going their way. I thought that given what felt like early pressure for Geno, I thought that would continue from Carolina. But I think that one bad drive in particular stands out. It's toward the south end zone. He targets Colby Parkinson for the second end zone target, someone else for the first, but it was just he was forcing it.
Yeah.
Like Geno is trying too hard to get something done there, and he's overthrowing, and it's not working. The vibe is not right. Mm-hmm. And I worried they are going to get into a place not where they don't have the talent or the scheme or the ability or the guys to get this done. They're going to get into a place where we've seen even this offense with Russell Wilson get into, we have to force something because the defense isn't doing it, or we have to force something because there are expectations. We have to force something because fans will boo. And I worried with that particular drive, and it was, I want to say in the second quarter, like, this is going to get out of hand. And that was the moment when I got a little nervous. And then you're right. Then it didn't.
Yeah.
Then they just buckled down, and, credit Waldron for, I think, getting the tight ends even more involved as part of that. Credit Ken Walker for being able to bounce outside when there wasn't space and get those explosive plays and, ease up some of that pressure on Geno from the Panthers defensive line. Like, they just got it done.
They did. And one of the things that's really comforting about having this version of Geno Smith as your quarterback is the fact that he's even keeled, right? Like you never get the sense of panic from him. Like, he's fiery, but he's, there's that video that the Seahawks tweeted out today of him talking to Jacson Smith and Jigba on the sidelines. And, like, that's exactly what it is that, you want to see from the leader, because like we say on the show all the time, when you're the quarterback for an NFL franchise, you're not just the most important player on the field. You're the face of a $5 billion organization. You're the de facto CEO, and the teams are going to go as you go. And so to see that from, I remember, I was in Phoenix watching the game at a cigar lounge down there, and there was one other Seahawks fan there, and he was feeling the same thing. He was just kind of like saying like, oh, here we go.
They're going to force this.
And he and I were talking, and I swear to you, this is true. I was like, look, I'm not worried about that with this quarterback. Like, I'm really not. I bet you he rights the ship and has a great rest of the game. And he ended up making me look good. I thought, he finished with really nice numbers.
Yeah.
And here he is. He's back in the top 10 of every meaningful category for quarterbacks in the NFL. And it's like, he's the same guy he was last year.
Yeah, which is such, we went from having Geno, obviously initially whether or not he'd sign that contract or they'd be able to retain him. We went from having Geno Smith as the biggest offseason story to immediately, once that was done, being like, okay, Geno's taken care of anyways. Like, what else is going on? But really, it continued to be true that one of the biggest stories that we all just didn't talk about enough was, can Geno keep doing this? Because ultimately, as the quarterback, the team goes where you go, right? Look at the difference in outlook for the Jets with Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson. Like, it is about the quarterback. It's the most important position in sports, and it's for that reason. So, I think that there were a very notable number of people that wondered whether there would be real regression from Geno, which I don't know that I thought would happen, just because it's not like Geno was a starter and was bad and then had one off year where he was good. Geno was a backup to players who never got injured. Like, he was a backup to players who never missed games. And obviously Rivers, Manning, and Wilson. When are you going to have a chance to prove yourself? Like, those three guys are franchise guys who are in huge contracts, right? If Geno was on a team where there was a quarterback competition and it was open, or if he was on a team where there was a player who was going to be benched, I truly think we would have seen a fine version of Geno Smith prior to last year.
Yeah. Well,
but he wasn't in that situation. Totally. You can't hold it against him.
Well, and we forget, like, this guy was, his last year in college, he was like a Heisman contender.
He's a baller.
He was considered to be a first round pick. And then, there were some maturity concerns that manifested, as a young player in New York, but it's never been an issue of talent with Geno Smith, which is so awesome to see. And here they are. The Seahawks are 4th in the NFL in points scored.
Yeah. Which I love. Okay, so I saw you tweet about Miami the other day. The love of our life. Mike McDaniel's obviously Mike McDaniel coaching that team, and we love him.
Yeah. How does it feel being in second place as far as
you mean to Tua?
Dating Mike McDaniel? No,
I don't know that I'm in second place. I think that what it is I think I'm kind of like the end goal. I'm the great white buffalo for Michael. And, right now
I'm just a placeholder.
Yeah. I am in love with this team. They're so fun to watch, and I love him. This offense is just absolutely amazing.
He's the Jim Halpert of the NFL.
I know. I saw you tweet that out, though. I referenced it on the show today. I was like, our friend Jacson tweeted out, the points leaders, and the Seahawks were 4th. And I was so shocked. And I don't know why. I was shocked. It's not like they've, week 1 was a bummer, but then it was a shootout with Detroit, and then they dropped almost 40 on the Panthers. Why am I surprised? But I think, no game has felt completely safe, and maybe that's part of it. But they've been so
I think that's true of like 90% of NFL games, though, even
currently,
with good teams.
The Dolphins,
definitely right now. Yeah.
Maybe a handful of games have been like, that game's over, it's boring. Like, it's been kind of a weird start to the season. I actually have a question. So when we were talking about Geno, and you were talking about him being even keeled, 1,000% agree. And I was thinking, it's so interesting because we're praising Geno, and I don't think we're being hypocrites. I'm just now thinking about, like, what is it? We're praising Geno for keeping it together, remaining cool, just keeping calm in those moments. At the same time, Russell Wilson was kind of panned for being too robotic and keeping it too cool. Yeah. Both guys know how to stay level. Because I believe this too, what makes Geno either more believable or more likable, for lack of a better word there? Because they both have kind of a similar approach with that. It's not like Geno's getting like crazy fired up.
No, and I think most of the great quarterbacks are that way. I mean, you have some outliers who were amazing and were really fiery, Tom Brady being the most obvious example of that. Yeah. But, I think that Russell Wilson had a really difficult time connecting with the first group that he came up with. That was a locker room filled with massive personalities. And they saw a favoritism from the coach that I think Pete Carroll has learned from, and didn't take kindly to that. And I think that was part of it. I do think Russell Wilson had a much better relationship with the players on the 2016 through 2019 teams. I've always said that I don't think his teammates ever had doubts about him on Sunday with Russell Wilson.
I agree. I know that to be true.
I think it was the Monday through Saturday stuff. I think it was the offseason stuff. With Geno, though, I would say the difference is there seems to be a real connection with these guys. And, when you would see the sideline videos of Russell Wilson, it was what you want to see. Never down, always up, but it was lots of cliche stuff.
Yeah.
Contrast it with this Geno Smith video of him and Jacson Smith and Jigba, and just like sitting down in his face, one-on-one. Hey, I need you to listen to me right now. You are good. You are the best. That pick, that was on me. Okay. I need you to still be out there. It's on me to find you. If you're not getting the ball, that's not your fault. That's my fault. I can't imagine Russell Wilson or most quarterbacks saying that. Geno Smith is on a Hall of Fame trajectory with his quotes. His pregame, postgame quotes, like he says stuff that really resonates.
Point the finger or point the thumb, not the finger. Like just stuff.
Yeah, exactly. After Detroit, we came in their trap. We took over their trap. Like he's speaking these guys' language, and that's, I think, probably what the barrier was with Russ. Is I don't know that he was speaking the language of his teammates to the same degree in terms of just connecting with them on a human level. But I've never doubted the Sunday mentality of Russell Wilson, like ever, even when he struggled.
Oh, that's such a good point. You've managed to perfectly articulate how I feel without me being able to do it. I was like, man, I feel like I've maybe panned Russell Wilson for exactly what I'm saying about Geno, but I feel so different. I feel differently about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about JSN here a little bit, since we mentioned him a couple of times. I still think he's the best receiver from that draft class, but he has, what's he got, like 37 receiving yards through 3 games. He had 2 targets in this game. He had a 10-yard bubble screen on like 3rd and 18, kind of meaningless plays. The only other target was the interception. Are you worried about his lack of involvement so far?
No, not at all. Not yet. I think that there's always going to be a fear with any investment, and a first round pick is an investment that you've made a risk that you can't, have come back to help you, right? Like if he was a 7th rounder, no one would care. But like, did I have Jake Bobo getting a touchdown before JSN? I did not have that on my 2023 bingo card.
Well, that's on you.
The first rookie Jacson to score.
I played myself. But no, I mean, because you got to think too, like this guy, you guys at camp looked so good. Like he looked we talked to Artie Burns about him, and Artie Burns used the word that was exactly the word that I heard used most about him, which was smooth. He looks smooth. Like, then he got hurt, and then he had wrist surgery, and then he came right back out, and we didn't even know, guys, if he would play week 1. You know what I mean? So I think that because he jumped right back into it and, didn't miss actual games, we're just thinking like, oh, he's going to pick up from training camp. And it's like, hang on a minute. This guy just had surgery. He also is on an offense where, he's going to be compared to Zay Flowers, obviously. There are more weapons for Geno Smith in Seattle than there are for Lamar. And it's not to say that, I think Baltimore is going to be really solid, but like they frankly need Zay more right now than Seattle needs Jacson.
Absolutely true. And, I try real hard not to read too much into 30-second social media clips, but it looked clear that Smith and Jigbo was feeling down on the sidelines, which is fine. That's human. That's okay. And that's where a guy like Geno comes in. What I'd like to see moving forward, however, is getting him a couple of layups early in the game. Instead of waiting for him to force his way into the game plan, give him the confidence, give him a couple of easy ones early in the game. First couple of drives, target him 2 or 3 times. Make a point of it. You're scripting those plays anyway. And he's shown that he can play throughout the formation. Put him in a situation where he gets the ball in his hands, can get a first down or 2, and feel like he is a part of this offense. Because we hear former players talk about it all the time, the need to get into rhythm, right? Yeah. It's not like, you can't just bring an NBA player off of the bench and expect them to just start making shots right away. Like it takes rhythm. You hear running backs talk about how they got to get hit a couple of times before they can break a big run. They're feeling out the game, and he's never played in the NFL before this. He played in some big time college games, but I mean, at Ohio State, all those guys were just wide open all the time. And that's no knock on Smith and Jigbo's incredible collegiate production. It's just, the fact is, being that open isn't going to exist anymore. So how do we make this guy feel confident and feel like he's a meaningful part of the game? And I would love on Monday night to see them come out and just give him a couple of easy ones early.
Yeah, I agree. And there are opportunities against New York too. They're not a very complete team. They're a team with big question marks offensively and defensively. Like I learned a very important lesson, not for the first time in week 1, but as a reminder in week 1 to never look past a team that is weaker than your team on paper. Yeah. So I'm not looking past Detroit. You're on the road. You got your own issues to figure out. That said, there are opportunities to do exactly that. And so,
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
I'm here for it.
We're going to get to that Giants game in a minute, but I want to talk about a couple of other things here. One, the running backs. You mentioned Ken Walker earlier, and this is another thing that I wrote about in the Scar Thoughts article was Ken Walker faced a lot of doubts this offseason, which is crazy, coming off a 1,000-yard rookie year, runner-up for Offensive Rookie of the Year. The guy won the Doak Walker Award as the best running back in college football, and the things they were criticizing him for were, lack of success rate in short yardage situations, not being involved in the passing game, not being able to be on the field in third down. And the big one, I think, is he had so many rushes for negative yards, right? Where these guys are so used to being the best athlete on the field, they think, oh, okay, there's only 2 yards up the middle. I'm going to bounce this outside and try and go for the big game.
Yeah.
He is picking his spots with that so much better this year. Like he still has a couple of those runs every week, but there was one in the early fourth quarter of this last game where he took a handoff off right guard and there was nothing there. And you saw him like take a step to the outside and then change his mind and just put his head down and take the 3 yards that were there and push forward. And it's like he's not giving up that part of his game. We're still seeing him bounce outside that one run he had where he jab stepped in and got down the right sideline. And it looked like the defender like hit a trampoline going past him. Like he still has that. But he was the second leading receiver in this game. He had 59 yards receiving. He has scored 4 touchdowns, all from in close. They're not hesitating to give him the ball on 3rd and short. Like he is answering all of these doubts that didn't feel, outside of the being too eager to bounce things outside, none of the other stuff really registered with me as like a legitimate criticism. And then you have them use a 2nd round pick on Zach Charbonnet, who also looks great. Mm-hmm. And it was this idea that, well, it's a referendum on Ken Walker. And I don't think that's the case. I think that Pete Carroll just understands the need, especially for him, to have 2 really good running backs that he can count on. And I'm so impressed with what we're seeing from Ken Walker so far.
I am too. It's so funny, the idea of it being a referendum on Ken Walker too. When Ken Walker was selected and people were like, oh, but you have Chris Carson. It's like, do you not understand? You can never have too many good running backs. Mm-hmm. If any team knows that, it's Seattle. You can never have too many running backs. That position group has been so snake bitten and also so full of talent at times. Yeah. And they haven't been able to always tap into it because of those injuries. When it comes to the critiques, I feel like Ken Walker has been kind of some of the criticism, some is valid. You talked about like when he chooses to bounce outside and, when he tries to get creative and it's clearly not picking his spots right. Like those are real things that happened last year. I also think sometimes he's almost punished for not being, a more traditional running back. Like it's hard to say he's punished for not being a Derrick Henry type. Not that anyone else is,
right.
But he's a little bit more like an Eckler, a little bit more like a McCaffrey, a little bit more like a Kamara. And that's not to say that he is.
That's what works now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, you can't simultaneously say you can replace any running back because they all get hurt. You want to get them more involved in the passing game. That's how you become more valuable. And then knock someone's value for being a really multifaceted running back who can be creative, who can evade, pass rushers. And like, if you want the punishing hit, more often than not, it's not that Ken can't deliver it. More often than not, that's probably going to come from someone like Charbonnet. Like he's a very violent runner. I think
we saw that Sunday.
Yeah. Like Ken Walker is a great athlete. Mm-hmm. And like, I think that's not always going to be reflected by pure consistency, but it will be reflected by some pretty nice explosive plays. And he had those on Sunday.
Yeah, he really did. And I'm just so pleased. And maybe my favorite story out of that game was on the Bobo touchdown. Ken Walker was waving to the sidelines to get Zach Charbonnet in the game because he wanted Charbonnet to get his first touchdown, right? Like, that's cool. That to me is really, really cool because when it comes contract time, having those touchdowns matters, having those yards matters. And for him to say like, hey, get my guy in here, I want him to get a piece of this is really, really cool. And it shows remarkable leadership from a guy who is playing his 20th NFL game.
Yeah, from a guy who's a year older than the guy who he's like mentoring. He right before that, he was celebrating Zach's run because Zach had that like 12-yard carry and then like just knocks the daylights out of the poor Panthers defender in front of him. Yeah. And Walker is on the other side of the line. So he's holding up his arms like touchdown, like he's signaling, like he's freaking out, and it's noticeable because he's the only one doing it because he's, one of the only guys who can't see whether or not it was actually in there. And then obviously he like motions for like, I'll go out here and put Zach in here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I saw that. That was, he's got a lot of personality, man. Like the what was it? The pickup where he has the spin move, he kind of turns and does the "Are you not entertained?" Showboating kind of pose to the sideline. I was like, I love physicality and kind of like violence defensively. And I love fun on offense. Like that is the best thing to have from both sides of the ball.
Yeah, last season we had Matt Nichols on, who is a really accomplished offensive lineman in college and just kind of a guru when it comes to breaking down O-line play. And we were talking about the value of a running back like that that's not going to show up in EPA. It's not going to show up in the box score. But like a 15-yard reception is like, everyone's like, all right, good play. A 15-yard run gets the sideline hype. It's the same number of yards, but it's different juice, right? Because those 15 yards came a lot more difficult than, hitting an out route at the sticks. It's like, if you're making guys miss or running through dudes, like that hypes everybody up. So, I think that's something that Pete Carroll, and that honestly, I think a lot of football coaches value about the running back position that isn't captured on the spreadsheet.
I agree. And I'll say that also with special teams. I think that's another reason Pete really values special teams. DJ had a great return in this one. And let me tell you, if there is one way to get your sideline amped up and get the morale on your team to bounce back in seconds after a punt, it's a punt return that like absolutely runs over a couple guys. Like nothing gets the sideline more hyped in my experience than a really big return. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Last thing before we get to the Giants game, I do want to touch on this O-line because that was my biggest fear. I mean, that Rams game was just a comedy of calamity. Like Mike and I were watching it together in Palm Springs and we were just like laughing. It was like, oh, Charles Cross is out. Oh, and Abe Lucas is out. Like,
laughing away the pain.
Of course.
And then Tyler Lockett and Uchenna Nwosu. Like, let's just put your 4 of your 5 best players on the sideline in like 3 minutes.
DK gets hit in the back. No, sure. Keep it coming.
And it's like, well, we get Aiden Hutchinson next week. And so let's call it what it is. They do a panic signing of a retired Jason Peters and bring him in. And then Stone Forsythe and Jake Curran go out and play the game of their lives against Detroit. They were awesome again against Carolina. I mean, this is a team that had 425 yards of total offense. They only gave up 2 sacks on 38 dropbacks. They averaged 5 yards a carry. Like, these are O-line stats also.
And I also Andy Dickerson has done a great job with this offensive line. Has been one of the most underappreciated, quote, new additions. He's obviously been there for a couple of years, but new additions, obviously came over with Waldron. He's been a huge part of that. And I think too, like, this is where you look at the running backs, you look at the tight ends, you look at, the ways that Shane Waldron has been working with, Andy, presumably behind the scenes to try to add to some of that help. Like, this is when having a more complete offense really helps. Like, you have guys that can help out when you're short your 2 starting tackles and last week a starting guard. I fully expected them to lose against the Lions. Like, I turned on that game and I thought, this is going to be over. This is done. Geno Smith is going to be bulldozed on every other play.
You're preparing for your week of phone calls on the radio?
Truly. Yeah, I was like, okay, let's see. How do I do this? Do we go angry? Do we try to make it fun? Do we talk about like, hey, what should they do with the offensive line? No one likes that conversation. Like, I'm already planning a week of like, okay, so how am I going to talk about starting 0-2? I'm looking up numbers of like teams that started 0-2 that like went to
it's like the first quarter of the second week.
Before that game on the Friday, I was like, last year the Bengals were 0-2 to start the season.
Right,
I'm already talking about it like it's happening, and they blew me away. And they did it again. I mean, in a different way again, but I do want to point to Andy Dickerson and with the tight ends and stuff for helping there too. It's been so key for them.
Yeah, and 2 tips of the hat. One, to Pete Carroll after the Lions game, the first people that he shouted out in the locker room were Jake and Stone. And he wanted to make sure the team appreciated what they did on short notice. And then also to Shane Waldron for scheming ways to help his offensive line out. I didn't hate Darrell Bevell. I didn't hate Brian Schottenheimer, but neither of them could counterpunch the way that Shane Waldron can. And I think that is so crucial, not only as the game goes on, but as the season goes on. As you put more and more tape out there for your opponents, the ability to have something else is so crucial. And Seattle has something else when they need it.
Yeah, it's, again, I'm once again stealing a line from Bump, but he's right. The entire game is about adjustments. Like, it's about who has the best personnel. You got to have a lot of talent, right? But every team has talent. The worst team in the league still has ballers. Like, the point is, can you adjust? And that's when you look at coaching, your offensive coordinators, your defensive coordinators. Do you learn? Do you grow? Do you get better? Do you add? What do you do moving forward? It was the most important question for the Seahawks after week 1. It wasn't necessarily going to be, hey, is this team a bust? Are they going to have the first overall pick and take Caleb Williams? It was, well, what do you do now? How do you adjust? Do you sign someone? Do you change up, someone's role on defense? Do you have a really tough conversation with defensive players? What do you do now? And they responded really well in week 2, did it again in week 3. And every week, being kind of a more pessimistic person, I've left looking at, a number of stats going, oh, I got to be better on third down.
Right.
But I also, for the last 2 weeks, have had to hand it to them. Yeah, have had to hand it to them at the end of the day. I'm like, hey, you still gave up a ton of yards in week 2. You also brought a bit more pressure, and you got a pick. You know what I mean? Like, there was improvement there. So what else can I say?
Totally. That's it. I mean, if perfection is the expectation, you're always going to be disappointed. Right. Can you be good enough? And Seahawks have been good enough the last 2 weeks. They've got some momentum. And I think if you polled Seahawks fans before the season and asked them what you thought the team's record would be after 3 games, I'm guessing the median answer would be 2-1. It's exactly where the team finds themselves, even though the loss may not have been the one most anticipated. But like we talked about, it's remarkable they've done it with a pretty crazy string of injuries. They're been missing a lot of their most important players, and yet they've won 2 in a row. They have a chance to get healthy with just 1 game in the next 20 days. Like, that's huge. When the schedule came out, I was like, fuck, early bye. I don't love that. And now I'm like,
exactly
that can't get here soon enough.
Now you're like, God is good all the time. Like, wow, a week 5 bye. This is amazing.
Yes. He doesn't always give you what you want, right? But she'll give you what you need.
Exactly.
But like I say, you get that 1 game in the next 20 days, which is huge for these guys. That game happens to be on Monday night in New York against a struggling Giants team. And then it's the bye week. Despite Seattle's momentum and the Giants' struggles, New York is actually favored in this game. So when you look at these 2 teams, what do you see? How well do you think the Seahawks match up with the Giants?
Well, I think that you're going to look at, obviously, a Seahawks team that I'm sure you have the number on hand, but they are, between 29th and 31 in points surrendered.
Yeah, 4th in points scored and 4th in points given up. 4th most points given up.
On paper, the defense is atrocious.
Yeah.
They are atrocious. Not reflected on paper is the return of Jamal Adams, is the pressure that they were able to bring against Andy Dalton, is the big plays that they were able to get against Detroit at the most timely moments. Because that isn't always stuff that shows up in the stat sheet. It shows up in the final score, right? It gives the offense 1 more possession, or it does something else. They're not limiting teams. They're not kicking teams off the field. They are letting teams, move the chains. And that is always going to look like an opportunity for an opponent. And I think that this team may, for the time being, get away with continuing to give all that up if they can still get those big plays. And the one thing they have going in their favor, and the one thing that like a national audience isn't always going to know, is like, I feel like Devin's got one in him.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like Trey might have one in him.
Yeah.
Like I feel like Jaron might have one in him. Like, you aren't going to see that if you're not covering this team, because who in New York is having a conversation today about Devin Witherspoon? Right.
And here's what I think sets up nicely for Seattle. I agree with all of that. Is the way that Seattle's defense has been beat this year is through the air, and the Giants have been really bad at passing the football. I mean, let's just be honest, they've been bad at passing football since they got Daniel Jones, and that's not all on Daniel Jones, but here he is again. Yeah, I'm no Daniel Jones apologist, certainly, but here's a guy who's basically averaging 1 touchdown per game in his career.
Yeah.
And he only has 2 this year against 4 interceptions. Now, granted, he's played the Cowboys. He's played the 49ers. He's played a Cardinals defense that's much better so far than we thought. But I look at that team, and I only see one scary guy on offense, especially if Saquon is going to be out. And that's Darren Waller. And last year, that would have been a death sentence because no team was worse at guarding tight ends than the Seahawks were. They've been awesome against tight ends this year. Tyler Higbee did nothing. Sam Laporta had a decent game, but not as good as his other two. Hayden Hurst was pretty non-existent. They've been really good at that so far. I think if they can keep Waller down, I don't know how the Giants get close to the 30 points that Seattle has been given up.
I'm smelling a big Julian Love game, guys. I don't know about you. I've always been high on him. I've always been very high on him. My record would show.
So let's talk about that. I was actually listening to Heath Cummings, who's a football analyst for CBS, interviewed Mark Andrews this week. And he was like, okay, how much of this stuff that we think matters actually matters? Contract year, the squeaky wheel game, all of these things that we think like,
okay.
That's the one. He said Mark Andrews basically poo-pooed all of them except for the revenge game. He said that is a real deal. And this is Julian Love's revenge game. He is going back to New York for the first time from the team that didn't give him the money he was looking for. So we might have our Julian Love game.
It's a tiny bit of a Jamal revenge game. Never played for the Giants.
Did
play in that stadium, if I'm not mistaken. Not like a revenge game, but it is kind of like I'm coming back to a stadium. I'm, coming back to a city. I love the idea of a Julian Love revenge game.
Jamal Adams had that play a few years back where he literally just grabbed the ball out of Daniel Jones' little pigeon hands and just ran to the end zone.
He palmed it and then took it in to score back when he was still with the Jets. He literally palmed the ball out of Jones' hands as he was throwing it.
Did you guys watch, I don't know how many other games you watched. Did anyone see TJ Hawkinson get the ball stripped out of his hands? I would love that kind of moment of just I would simply leave the stadium. I would simply have to take myself out of the game. If not even I fumbled, if a ball was taken, stripped from my fingers, I would leave. I have to check out.
Totally. It's like getting pantsed at a party. You're just not, you're not going back.
No. I'm I need to go.
Would you rather go through that, or would you rather get hit by Zach Charbonnet the way he did that guy dirty on the goal line?
Oh yeah, How would
you rather get sunned?
I would rather do the one that requires the fewest amount of people knowing me, which would be the defender getting hit.
Yeah.
They're just going to be like, Zach Charbonnet, look at what he did.
Right.
If I'm the guy, you know what I mean? Everyone knows it was TJ Hawkinson losing it. Who took it from him?
Mm-hmm. Great point.
I don't know.
Great point. And these are such prideful individuals too, right? You just don't make it to the NFL without that. So yeah, that's great. So we got an over-under of 46 in this game. We've got the Giants favored by 1.5. So that basically equates to Vegas is saying this is either going to be 24-22 or 24-23 Giants. What's your score prediction for Monday?
Okay, I feel like I should go bold. I'm going to go I'm going to say Seattle hits over 30 again. I'm going with a trend, and I'm going optimistic. So I'm going to say they get 34.
Love that.
Yeah, I'm going to say they still allow a lot of points. That we see some of the unfortunate trends. So I'll give am I going to do another 10-point difference? It feels too perfect, but I'll do 24-34 again.
Love that.
I was tempted to do 30-34, but I'll go 34-24 Seattle. I think we're still going to see the Giants get their yardage. Seattle's they're not going to shut that down in 1 week after having it as a clear trend for a while. But I think the positive trend we're seeing is big plays starting to tap into some of that pressure. The things that you don't always see if you're just a casual fan looking at, Sports Center after going, okay, the Seahawks won, but they allowed how many points? 30? They're trash.
Right. Yeah.
I'll go with that.
Yeah, totally. I'm so sorry for not remembering who it was, but someone tweeted at me yesterday that was pointed out what the line was. And he was just like, somebody talk me out of risking it all on Seattle to win this game. And my response was, fuck it. Bet it all. Money is a social construct. We're all just a loosely assembled collection of molecules. Death is inevitable. Let it ride. And that's what I ended up doing. I put a significant bet on Seattle to win outright and for the over, because these defenses are combining to average 30 points allowed. They are 29th and 30th in the NFL in points allowed. There's going to be points in this game. And I'm with you. They destroyed the Giants last year. And the Giants were better last year than they've been so far this year.
Yeah.
And they're not going to have Saquon Barkley, most likely. I don't see where the points come from with the Giants unless Seattle is giving up big plays in special teams or turning the ball over. And they haven't done either of those things yet this year. So for the Giants to win, we're going to have to see a departure from what we've seen from both of these teams so far through 3 games. So all of that being said, 16-12 Giants over Seahawks.
Love it.
I know that's how it's going to end up going.
They avoided Colt McCoy this time. They're good.
I've looked at pages of stats that I have, and I have to say, I threw them away because numbers mean nothing.
My money says 34-20 Seattle.
Yeah.
But, my gut is saying this is going to somehow end up just being a grind. There's going to be like a snowstorm that moves through New York while the game's being played.
There will be some kind of chaotic moment.
Yes.
It's going to be a DJ Dallas Wildcat play will work. There's going to be something like
there had to have been like an equipment malfunction with Geno or something for them to run that twice in a row.
Way.
Like there's no way that was part of the game plan.
It was just a moment maybe where Shane was like, I'm so sorry. I was getting a text and fell apart for a minute. Right. My bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
totally.
a preseason for me.
Well, listen, Stacy, thank you so much for coming on. We love talking ball with you, and we really, really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. I hope for all of us, but especially you, that you don't lose any money on this bet. But I don't think you will. I feel really good about this game.
Thank you, Stacy. I appreciate that. Listen, before we go, where can the listeners find more of you?
You can listen to me every single weekday on Seattle Sports 7:10 a.m. from 10 to 2. And you can also find me at Stacy Rost on Twitter/X.com, I guess. Still getting used to it.
Yeah, us too.
Still doing it.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for today. I think we're all starting to feel a little bit better about this team, and the thought of being 3-1 heading into the bye is a welcome one. And we'll be back next week to chop up the results of that game right here with you. As always, you can find Mike and I on social media. I am on Twitter at @JacksonBevins. That's JACSON. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on Twitter at @MikeBarwin, and the show itself is @CigarThoughts. You can also find us on Instagram and Threads at @CigarThoughtsNFL, and on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok at @CigarThoughts. Of course, you can listen to this show and read every article at fieldgoals.com/cigarthoughts. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you like the show, drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. Finally, be sure to check out cigarthoughtsnfl.com to get your exclusive Cigar Thoughts cigars, or hit me up on Twitter and I'll shoot you the deets. And when you buy those cigars, reach out with a pic and tell us what you think. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of this show. We know you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it's an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing this show on social media and with your friends, you give us the juice to keep making this happen. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.